Okay, so welcome to the test pilot, the pilot of Blackbox thinking. And here today with us, I'd say in the studio, but definitely not in coronavirus time. We're doing Zoom and we're recording this. We have Chris and Carol. And today we were talking about China and education and its relevance to what's happening in the world. And Carol had asked me where black box thinking came from for this podcast. And randomly, I'm sitting in a black box, which is a shipping container painted black at the Common. And the Common is a co-working space in Squamish. And I also just happened to be reading a book, which is by this gentleman, Matthew Syed, called Blackbox Thinking, which is a really, really fantastic book. And it takes the analogy of the black box, which is in an aircraft. And over the course of history, the airline industry has been really amazing at recognizing when they've made mistakes and analyzing them so that they don't happen again. And in order to do that, there's a lot of psychological techniques, and people sort of ignore that they make mistakes sometimes and errors. And I think that's really relevant to us as what we're going through this pandemic and generally, because it's a time to think about what's happening, but also come up with solutions that are maybe innovative and a little bit different. So that's the purpose of today. And so, as I said, Chris and Carol, they both have background and sort of in China. Apologies. This is our first episode, so this might be a little bit rushed. And so their background, and they were brought together because we thought we should look at China, and not just because of the coronavirus, but really education, which is obviously the foundation for all of us of how we learn and how we make decisions in life. And we're going to have to make some really big new decisions. So education, I think, is a great one to start with. So that being said, I think I'd like to get Chris and Carol to do some introductions, explain where they are, where they've been. So maybe Chris, if you want to kick it off and we can get going.
Okay, great. Thanks for the introduction, Peter. My name is Chris Winters. I'm currently in Seattle, Washington. I'm American, so I was not able to get over the border before they locked it down. But I generally live in Squamish, and I work at the Common. So I originally moved to China in 2008 to start Farview Education, and was in Beijing from 2008 to 2013, running in the city. Our purpose there was to supplement the education system in China, which is heavily math and science focused, with more creative and extracurricular focus, and it kind of helped build students. Our focus was first in the major cities, but we worked in extensively in places like Changsha and Shenyang and Chengdu that are becoming more and more known as more students and more companies are coming from those locations. And our, I'll do a little share screen just to give a
yeah, that'd be great. I mean, for me, I know when you mention those names, I have no idea where those are in China, so that'd be awesome.
So this is, I'm just using website and a couple of just regular images of, what our office looked like back in Beijing days. We also had an office in Shanghai, Taipei, and Hong Kong, but we'd work very directly with our students and kind of help foster them and kind of grow over the years to eventually apply to schools, mostly in United States, but also to some extent in, sorry, go back to this guy, in Canada and the UK. What we eventually did, we created an online system to help us kind of give a curriculum to our students. That was our big push while we were in China. Unfortunately, the limitations of technology at the time made it very difficult. But one of the benefits of the coronavirus is it's given me a lot of time to rehash a lot of our material. So now we're starting to put together a fully online system that can really work with students all over. We'll get back into this a little bit more, but it's one of the silver linings, if you will, of the coronavirus. since then, I moved to Hong Kong and worked kind of more remotely with the company. And we do have students all over the world, so we're able to work remote. And that brought me to BC eventually, where we have students in BC, but I like to spend time outside skiing mostly. And unfortunately, the skiing in China, while it's growing, I had to give up a couple seasons while I was there. So it's great to be in BC and make use of the wonderful winters that we have there, but also work remotely all over the world, which is again one of the real great things about what we're all going through, is that this is the reality now, is we're all remote workers, at least for the next couple weeks or months. So, I will stop share.
That's great. And then just a little addition, I think your skiing was mentioned there, Chris. And Chris just came back from a trip, and you've frozen. Are you still there, Chris?
I'm still there. I'm not moving.
Oh yeah, you're back. Not surprising that these voice video conferencing still works for a number of people using it. Every time you turn the radio, it's like, oh, we're zooming, and it's like, wow. So yeah, that was something that came up before, and that trip got really heavily impacted by the COVID, and you had to make some changes there. So I don't know if you want to jump in now, or maybe we'll come to that as a bit later on.
Sure. So one of my fascinations when I was living in China is that, like everything, as China becomes more connected with the world and experiences new and exciting things, they have a tremendous hunger for it. And that's particularly the case with skiing. China now has the most ski resorts of any country in the world. And 20 years ago, even when I was there was less than probably a handful. So I've always been fascinated with the skiing, partially because that's a huge part of my life. And I also came across this group of skiers in the far northwest corner, in what might be actually the birthplace of the skiing, many thousands of years ago, in what is now northwest China, but back then was just the rolling mountains of the Altai Mountains. So I went there last winter to kind of check it out, and over the last year I've developed a full project that was going there to film and kind of tell this story. While we were there, we had a whole team with us. We were filming with these very interesting indigenous people of the area that make their own skis, very back to the earth kind of living, where they make the horse. They use the horses that they use for getting around and for commerce, and pretty much everything in life that they eventually eat, they turn into a ski on the bottom of wood. So we were kind of there to document these really interesting people. Sadly, the coronavirus broke out pretty much while we were there, or at least became public knowledge in China. This is the 23rd, 24th of January. Considering our extreme remoteness, we had a difficult time getting ferried out. The weather also made it difficult, but the extreme generosity of the people of the village and of the government of Xinjiang really came to our aid and made sure that we all escaped. So it was very dramatic and intense, but it's now become what we're building into a documentary that is just about that experience and how we have all kind of adapted around the world now that it's no longer just something that was in China, like when we were there, but really, if anywhere, it's where I am in America, it's the worst. So
what's the name of the documentary, Chris, if people want to look it up?
A Return to Roots. The original project was Snow Hunters, but this project is very much talking about how while we focus on that trip, the real story is about how everyone has been forced to kind of reprioritize what's important to us. First, because we're not able to leave our houses, so you start to realize what's important. And as a result, some of the silver linings have been reduced consumption, less travel, less carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere.
An interesting one might be your story. Is that true that you ran on the highway in Beijing when you were coming back? And that's how quiet it was and how the traffic has changed.
Yes, so this was right before the travel kind of ban that our country put into place, February 1st. And I flew back through Beijing and spent a couple of days there. And it was during Chinese New Year, so there's always a little bit of a slowdown. But considering that the Beijing roads are typically a parking lot, just full of cars that barely move, to go down the third ring road in the middle of the third ring road and jog was surreal. So, but now you can do that in Times Square, go down Broadway, or many other places around the world. So this is a common struggle that everyone is going through, and I think that's one of the other great things is it's kind of broken down nations and people of different cultures, and everyone's going through this. Everyone's got a common enemy.
We'll get to that, I guess, in the final thing. Let's get Carol on, and let's hear a little bit of history from where you are, how you ended up in Squamish, Carol, and what your background is. And maybe Chris or Carol can bring up a map of China so people understand where we're talking about, maybe. And I know there's a lot of stats and numbers which always blow me away, Chris, when we've had some conversations about the number of ski resorts you mentioned, but how many there are, and the number of people. So anyway, we can think about that. But Carol, if you want to take it away and introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. And I'm Carol Huang. Just last year, I came to Squamish from Shanghai, so I'm newcomer here, and I really love the Squamish community here. And thank you all for this opportunity for me to know more friends. And I used to be an English teacher in high school in Shanghai for nearly about 20 years. And I was the director of the students activity department. So I'm very familiar with the educational system in China. And now I decide to pursue new aim, new life. And because I'm really quite curious about new things, so I decided to move to Canada and now move to Squamish, and I set up this Dr. Panda Academy. The school mainly provide some after-school STEM courses, some engineering, math, and especially robotic courses for students to enjoy, to have fun. But due to the coronavirus, my school cannot open as planned in April, so the opening day will be rescheduled. And anyway, I'm also doing some online lessons from here to students both in Vancouver, in Squamish, and in Shanghai. And I think, it's really very big change I can feel between the education system in China and in Canada. Especially, I think Squamish here has a quite unique culture. People love the nature and enjoy physical activities a lot. And mainly, I think in China, parents and kids will devote most of their time in academic learning. So I think maybe the balance, I prefer the balance between both the activity in physical activities, the nature things, and academic learning, to keep it a balance. That may be always to keeping a balance may be very important. We call philosophy, Chinese culture.
So Carol, talking about balance, it'd be really interesting to hear your education, because you said the school in China, you were there for 20 years, including 4 years as a student. So maybe you can give a sense for anybody probably watching this, what education is like in China, because you just said that here and in the UK as well, where I'm from, we value sort of outdoor activity. So give you a sense of what it was like getting education in China.
Getting the education in China, can I? Yeah, maybe. I think actually the education system in China has changed a lot during the past maybe 20 or 30 years, because during the development of the country, the education system also changed a lot. But
interesting. So maybe very briefly, what would you say is the history of education in China, if you could?
The history, I think anyway, the history of education in China, that is, yeah, people always put very much emphasis on the performance of academic subjects, especially the Chinese, math, science, yeah, on those performances always, no matter whether it's in ancient times or in modern times, the academic performance are valued very high, and those students who can achieve high scores are always respected or highly recognized or praised by both parents and teachers.
That's interesting. I mean, I want you to carry on in a second, Carol, but Chris, you're American and I'm British, so I only hear about this. I don't know about it. Whereas in the US, I understand you can get into, say, Harvard, Yale, and all that if you have some sport and sporting like prowess and skills. So is that very different to what you're hearing from Carol?
Yeah, well, so that was essentially what we were in China to do, is to supplement the common kind of focus that most Chinese parents and the society for really thousands of years, back to Confucius days, several thousand years ago. And in America, to be successful, it's important to be up high, have the good scores, but it's about being well-rounded. Like Carol said about, being in Squamish, having a lot of outdoors, but also having some good cultural and academic options, especially in Vancouver. The students that succeed are the students that are able to do more than just do well in grades. Not to say that it's not important to do well on your scores, but that is a fundamental kind of difference between the West and the East. And I won't call it even a difference. I'll just say it's prized to be, there's a lot more room to be unique in the States, whereas in China, it's very much about performance.
Well, I don't want to go into a discussion psychology and culture, but I'd actually just give some experience myself. I have a little bit of experience in the guiding world, and the one thing I recognize, say in Canada specifically, and it might be unique here, that when you become a guide, one of the skill sets is how you interact with people. It's not just your technical skills.
Yeah.
In France, for example, if you become a ski instructor, they want you to perform in the top percentage of ski races. And if you become a ski instructor, you want to teach people to learn. So I taught avalanche courses, and I recognized only recently that if you connect with somebody very well emotionally, then they're going to learn a lot better. So that's what my personal story is. So I see the East-West, but it's also very cultural. That's my thing. I was going to say maybe the Confucius thing got me interested. Chris, Carol, did you want to go a little bit more into the history and then your education in China and then we can move into how things are changing over the time. So if you want to carry on where you left off, Carol.
Yeah, I think, maybe in the history, I think more emphasis are put on the teachers. In ancient times, all the parents, maybe many parents, they cannot read, and if they can send kids to school to be educated, it's really very precious, I think, opportunity. And the parents just ask the kids to follow the teacher, no matter whether the teacher is right or wrong, just to follow the teacher. If teachers say, oh, you are wrong, then parents will punish the kids, okay? What the teacher says is all correct, and just follow the teachers. That's the history. But nowadays, I think because more influenced by the Western countries, and nowadays the system in China, the in education system will focus more on the students, and also we will emphasize or value their uniqueness, and the students will ask more space to develop their own talents, and the teachers will also organize the class. I think focusing more on individual students, how they understand, how they will do, or how they will perform in my class. But actually, still, teachers now still struggling, I can say, to keep the balance, because sometimes if you cater to students' uniqueness, but on the other side, you still have to make sure they can get high score. Mm-hmm. So that's maybe a conflict, and you have to struggle to keep the balance, to make the classroom fun, enjoyable, make them sometimes keep relaxed and enjoy your lesson. But otherwise, on the other side, you still have to be effective and make them have high score. Otherwise, they cannot enter the university they aim. Okay, so that's the conflict. Many people are still struggling. Okay,
interesting. We might be jumping ahead to the future, but Chris, one thing that actually this black box thinking is about, Carol, is critical thinking. Is that what you're hearing? Maybe a difference between China and the US, that being told what to do versus being allowed to think what you can do by yourself might be a difference in the human psyche, and then we'll go into how coronavirus and the world's going to change. What do you think about that?
I mean, if I can jump in, I'm not going to try to pretend like I'm an expert on China education. Our focus was to offer, you know, a little bit more of a range past what most students were getting in their school. I think that there's more and more push to be more creative, particularly because the Chinese education system realizes that, you know, it's not always the top performers that are going to be the best, but even if it is, for those top performers, if they're not able to think critically and you know, be able to adapt, then, you know, they're not going to be able to survive at the highest level. So I think it's definitely something that's changing, but without getting too deep into it, there is just basic cultural differences that, you know, China has been a unified country for thousands of years and is very much focused on the communal good, whereas America is much more about the individual and a lot more kind of, you know, there's good and bad in both systems. There's definitely a lot of bad when you look at some people in the States and how they use their individualists to their own personal gain. But I think it's really important as we proceed into the future that there is a balance. And in the same way that, you know, China is sometimes a little hard on their students, I think some of that discipline would be good for Western students. So.
Alrighty, so
yeah, actually, I'm the department. My department used to just to keep the discipline, okay, of students' performance in school.
So maybe we'll ask Chris about his education and but Carol, if you want to finish with your education, you just brought something up. You know, how you were taught. Do you see the benefit of going to more the Western model or something like that, and you see the way China is moving to a different way of thinking and acting is beneficial, or is there a negative side, or what do you think?
Pardon? You mean the change in education in China?
Yes, those changes you talked about, going from being told what to do to maybe, you know, thinking yourself. If you relate it to your education in school and how it might be changing, is that a positive direction that maybe China is going in? And we can talk about the US in a second.
Yeah. Okay. So from my point of view, of course, I quite agree. I think such a change is very positive. And anyway, every child is unique. Maybe the most biggest difference from the China's education system, that is, it emphasized the all-round good performance of the student. But actually, everyone recognize everyone has his own unique talent. And West countries always ask such a question, okay, where or what is your talent? And perform your talent and fulfill it. And that will be a successful person. Maybe you can be very good at literature and very poor at math, but you are still very successful. But maybe in China's education, if you are very good at Chinese but very poor at math, you cannot enter the university. And if you cannot get the university degree, it's hard for you to find a job. So that's a very practical problem. So that's why many students struggles, okay, and parents and teachers also struggles. So I think people nowadays more and more gradually recognize the talent, the uniqueness of the individual students. Of course, that's very positive way, and that's also the reason I think many people or many parents, they want to send their kids to go to United States, to go to Canada, to go to UK to get further education.
Okay.
In most cases, I can say those students, they have some strong points in one subject maybe, and they are not very good at other subjects. They are not all round, but maybe they can achieve more in their talent in the Western educational system. That's maybe the major reason why many parents or more and more parents want to send children to go to other countries to get further education. But on the other side, I think some people, misunderstand such a trend. They think when we emphasize the uniqueness of the students or focus on students, that means myself, I am the biggest one. I am the boss. Actually, it's not. So it's the disaster sometimes for the school, because I used to be the director of the students' activity. And because more and more students, they may become self-focused. And they ignore others' feelings, others' opportunities. And I think, I am important. You need to cater to my need. Okay, also that makes a lot of troubles and conflicts. But anyway, I think when we deal with such conflicts, we will carry out discussions. We will talk with those students a lot, help them to recognize what may be the good behavior and what may be wrong, what may be right. That's also the growth for the students. But also many parents will also have some wrong thinking. That may be the negative side.
I think you just brought up a brilliant point, because it's something that I really wanted to get into, because with coronavirus, there is definitely a sense that we need to work together and be together. So the thing I always struggle with in China and understanding it, because I don't have much knowledge and experience, but you hear on one hand such a rich history about community and villagers and working together, yet at the same time you have that, you must follow what we're doing, whereas what I was going to get Chris to answer is, and this is going to be related to our responses to coronavirus in the different countries around the world. Chris, you were there when coronavirus broke out, and you could see that basically China told everybody what to do, and they listened, and everybody basically managed to get through this. Now we don't know the statistics, we don't know what really happened, but that's where possibly the advantage is. So maybe if you talk about the United States and the American education system and what Carol was just talking about, maybe that'd be interesting.
I mean, I'm trying to connect it directly to the responses in coronavirus. I think it's also just societal. In China, there's a lot more of a understanding that everyone's part of the larger China family, and there's a lot more kind of discipline and kind of respect for authorities. I have been surprised coming back to the States and seeing how well people have actually followed the directives, even though our leader has been very all over the place. I don't know if that's going to survive much longer. I know that there's a lot of conflict right now, and I think that that is, you know, an inherent American trait, is to say, I deserve, you know, special treatment, kind of like, you know, the individual students Carol mentioned in China, and that's very much an American trait, where everyone feels my liberties, I'm allowed to do what I want. But they enforce that on others. I mean, the fact that, you know, people are not social distancing, that's really just to the detriment of all the rest. So it really is kind of selfish. So, you know, it does kind of bear a little bit of what is, you know, both cultures, and, you know, how we respond. I'm not sure how much that necessarily comes to the education system. I think it's more of just the cultural pride, national pride, and, you know, what's fed down from the top.
But one of the things I think is what maybe what Carol was intimating is that by changing the way the education system in China might go towards more a US thing, then it might go towards a similar way that people act, because they're taught in school how to act, and then when it comes to adult life and it becomes a problem like this, then they'll be thinking differently. So therefore, you know, is that a negative thing of having more of an American way? So maybe because you've went through the American school system, Chris, but you've also seen China and the education there, what's the positives, negatives? What do you like about, you know, the things that you see in the American system versus the Chinese system? And where can those two maybe marry, and where's the nice balance, as Carol put it?
Well, you know, my product is American schools, and that's what we sell to our students. And fortunately, it's something that everyone wants. It's very sought after, but there's a reason, because I believe very strongly in, you know, especially the higher education system in America. It is about creating the individual, and, you know, really helping that individual become adaptable. A lot of students graduate from college in America without necessarily any vocational skill, you know, and a lot have to go into multiple different jobs or different fields before they actually, you know, find what they like. But frankly, that's what, you know, the future is. There's going to be less mechanics and, you know, even engineers in some senses, just because there's going to be new technologies that people are going to have to learn and develop, and new businesses, new fields even that come about. So that adaptability is so key. And I think that's why, you know, a lot of students come to the States from abroad as well, including China, is because they realize that, you know, it's not about just learning one type of subject. It's about becoming more developed as an individual and becoming more adaptable, so that regardless of what happens down the road, you're able to kind of develop, you know, become a part of a startup. I was originally an architecture student, and then I went and started a company in China, and I'm doing documentary movies. So it's not about just trying to learn one thing. It's about really kind of learning how to learn. And I think that is where the next step is, you know, without going too much into it right now, is the online. It's happening. As much as every student in the world right now is hating it, the majority of countries in the world right now, all the students are at home doing online learning. A lot of it over Zoom, what we're using, or other systems. And this was kind of inevitable down the road, but the coronavirus is going to, you know, jumpstart that whole movement. And, you know, while there's a lot of negativities in it, in the sense that, you know, you don't have that connection with other students and the teachers, it's going to provide a lot more opportunity to students that don't have the means to go to an expensive US school from rural China or other countries. It's going to open up the world. So I'm actually quite supportive, even though it means that, the actual university system that, I kind of push our students to might become irrelevant down the road. I think that the ability to learn internationally from other cultures, from other, ideally other students as well, that's going to be a hard one to do online. But if once we can crack that, then I think the whole education system, the global education system will shift.
Well, I think it's a good time. We've so far talked about the history and the past and the present. So you've moved us to the future. So Carol, what do you think of what Chris was just talking about? You agree with all of that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think actually, nowadays more and more parents, educators, parents, and I think as well as students, they realize the importance of the ability how to communicate with people. That may be the most important ability, okay, for the development in the whole lifelong span. But actually, when they are at school, they are mostly involved in the academic homeworks, a lot of tests. So they don't have many time. They don't have enough time to get into the activities, to cooperate, to communicate too much with the friends, or other strangers, if they don't have enough opportunities how to develop, right? But once they graduate from the university, once they change from a student to employee into the workforce, then they know, okay, how important it is to cooperate with different people. But that ability, usually many students still lack that ability. And another problem in China, that is most families have one child policy. Nowadays, okay, of course, okay, people can have 2 kids. And as to me, I'm the only child. That means I don't have sisters and brothers that I can communicate. So I'm the focus of the family. And for most, I think, students in China, they are the only child in family, and they are always the focus of the whole family. And when they get into the company, they will take it for granted that I am the focus. So if all the employees say, hey, I am the focus, and what should the boss do? The boss, really have very tough time, I think, these days. Actually, many boss, they complain because the young employees, so they play something. Maybe tomorrow they feel, I don't feel happy with you, so I just say goodbye to you. So the boss, really these days have tough days. And also, it's not good for those young people for their career development. And that's, I think, the way. But anyway, I think the history will go forward. And I believe those young people, they will, grow. And anyway, I think there will be positive solutions, to the problem. Even the coronavirus, because of the coronavirus, many child now have to stay at home. And actually in Shanghai, the educational bureau made online lessons for every grade, for every subject, nearly Chinese, math, English, physics, chemistry, etc. PE.
Right.
And they will display the program on TV. I think it's okay because I canceled the online lesson. Okay, so if it's okay with you, we can go on.
So that's one of the fundamental things that I always look at in between the West and the East and say, wow, that every school in America is shut down right now. but every school is required to do their own classes.
Yeah.
And some classes are being done well, some classes are not being done at all. So the ability to come together as a government and say, we're going to make standardized classes for everyone, and we're going to provide it, and obviously free for the populace. And that's something, you know, I definitely will tip my hat to China. It's something that, you know, I've been thinking for the last, you know, month and a half or so, you know, how dysfunctional this online system is in the US right now. Granted, everyone's trying to learn at the same time, and some teachers don't know how to use a computer, and there's just a lot of just growing pains. But if the whole country came together, or even state by state, and said, you know, we're going to develop an online system that works well, that is usable for all of our students, then it would actually be, you know, a functional, you know, solution. We probably won't have to deal with that in the future. I hope not. I hope that students are able to go back to school come next fall. But if the virus continues to cause issues, hopefully we learn from China and develop a better online system.
Well,
yeah, sorry. Maybe it's culture. Because of culture, I think just like the family, Western families are different from the Chinese families. In China, the parents will do a lot of things for kids, right? And Western families, maybe parents will say, hey, yeah, you need to be independent, and you need to deal with your own things and solve the problems by yourself, okay? Parents don't interfere much with kids or the daughter's son's affairs. And the government in China, I think sometimes it's just like the parent. Once there's some problem happens, the parents or the government, they will take the first reaction. They need to do something. They think it's their duty. They think it's their duty to do that thing for people. Just like parents need to do cooking, need to do your house chore for kids. Okay, they think it's their duty. Okay, but maybe even I think if in United States, even the government provide such a system, will that be popular? Will that be well received by parents?
So my thinking is that, you know, having, you know, more resources poured into one system will make it better, versus every school, and in some cases every teacher comes up with their own course, which again, this is hopefully a short-term situation, so it won't be something down the road that we continue to have to see a problem with. But the idea that you can just create so much more in China. There's so much more, both support from, you know, a one-party system that, you know, when it wants to make something happen, it makes something happen. And that's not the case in the States. You know, not only do we have multiple parties, but we have multiple states, we have multiple governments within. And the same goes for Canada in a lot of ways. Whenever I say the States, I have to mean Canada. So, yeah.
So, Chris, that's another good segue. So what I was going to ask you, one of the questions we had there for both Carol and Chris, if you were the world president for the day, and you know, you could change something that would help us get through this, but so that we don't repeat it again, and that you put in place the things that you wanted to do, what is that might be? Because I've heard quite a few interesting things here, because we came into this podcast to talk about how education and teaching kids and people in high school and universities will help us get through maybe the next pandemic and the next crisis and shape a better world. So now you are world leaders for the day. What do you think from your field of education and your sector that you'd like to do?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, doing something just for a day won't really do what I'd want to do. But if I was able to make an impact on the global arena, you know, I'm a globalist. I believe very strongly in, you know, the concept that the whole world needs to work together on more. And you know, that's definitely been the case on the coronavirus. There's been a lot of lack of cooperation that has caused a lot of messes. And you know, the more that can coexist in education, my whole focus is educating the world, using, you know, the Western education for the most part. But you know, at the same time, I'm a student myself of, you know, every place I go, and I believe so strongly in the sharing of knowledge and the sharing of kind of resources and sharing of, because we're all part of the same larger country.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if that would actually do anything in the day, if I abolished borders and made one big country, but that would be the gist of what I think would help cause you know, this to be less of an issue in the future.
That's a great response. So over to you, Carol. Maybe I'll remove the day thing out because it's a good point. It wouldn't be in a day, but Carol, what do you think?
I think, yeah, it's really very big question, but yeah, really very think yeah, good. I think maybe anyway, I think history first, when we go back to the history, maybe 100 years ago, the similar situation happened. So I think first, anyway, in any situation, we need to ask people to have hope. That may be the most important. Different strange things always happen, and history sometimes repeated itself. And through the history, we can see, anyway, we can find a way out. We can find a solution, and we will go forward. And another thing I think I will want to mention or put value on, that is also the connection, or what we mentioned, what I mentioned before, that is balance and connection. Every country, every nation will have its unique culture and the unique value and the system. If it exists, it will have the special reason for it, why it exists, why it works this way. And respect, but also we can do the connection, because when we have good communication, sometimes we can get the strong points of the other system, and then make our own system better and better, and keep the balance. That is very important, I think.
That's great. That's two great answers. One thing I've learned over the while, it's sometimes, if you think about a relationship, it's not just communication. I believe it's respect. And so when you respect another person or respect another way of doing things, then you can be open to ideas, and so communicating and understanding them is one thing. So I think they're two great answers. So we have 2 minutes left, because I know, Carol, you've got a class, I think, in a few minutes. And the very last question, which is going to be my icebreaker, but now we'll leave it at the end. What have you two done which has been different, or you changed since coronavirus? Have you learned a new skill, or decided on a new sort of way of living because of coronavirus? So a positive end to our podcast.
Mine's a very simple answer, and it reveals a lot about me. I've been in the same place. Been in the same place for, you know, more time than I can remember. Last time I was in the same place for this long was probably when I was in Beijing, when I lived there full time. I travel so much for work and for skiing that I'm never in one place long enough. Sadly, I don't really get to make use of where I am right now. First, I'm not in Squamish, where I actually call home, but also I'm in the same house for pretty much the whole time, but by myself. So, but it is allowing me to just be a little bit more focused and, you know, being here now, being present in the where I am. So I am thankful for that. I'm ready to get on a plane and fly back to Asia or somewhere else. But in the meantime, I'm here.
Great. And Carol?
Yeah, and I think in this situation, I think it put me more focus on online or more technological things. And anyway, because I have to open the school to keep the business going, and nowadays, so I have to switch to online courses. And I found many students really have positive feedbacks for online courses, because that really connects students no matter where the teacher is, where the students are, or where the host is. Okay, we can connect the good resources, yeah, for students theoretically all around the world. So maybe it will really begin a new trend for education, and maybe that will, when we say when a door is closed, a window may be open. So that may be a new window, a new trend, for the later development of the education.
That's awesome. Well, that's a great way to end it. And what I almost want to summarize what you said, but it's gonna be really hard. I think you have to write that down. But I think it sounds like communication, collaboration, and working together. And I think this virus is very much when you go through a trauma that Chris has said it. You have to sit with it. You have to accept what's going on. And you have to get ready for big changes. And they can be painful. And I think we've gone through a lot of pain. But I agree with both of you that it could be a very exciting time, that if we embrace it and learn to do new things together. So I think that's it. Unless there's any other comments, you have 1 minute before your class, Carol.
Thank you.
Okay.
No other questions for me.
Awesome. Well,
yeah. I canceled my class. I just mentioned.
I've been very efficient in that timing.
I do have a call at 5, unfortunately.
Okay.
So.
Well, thanks to both of you. This will be online, and we'll be on a website, and we'll get it out there. So have an awesome day, and thanks for joining us. And tune in next time.
And thank you, Chris. May I have your email or some phone call or something like that? So maybe I can introduce your company to my Shanghai friends and let them know if they want to send students. Maybe,
yeah. That's what we like to hear.
I'll send you my WeChat. It's Chris Winters.
Oh, you have WeChat. Oh, that's good.
Alrighty, well, yes. I'll let Chris go. Enjoy your days, and then great. That was another purpose of the meeting, was to connect people. So great way we've achieved our goal, which is connection. So have a great day.
How to?
Bye.
Yeah, I'll send you an email.
Oh, okay. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Bye.